It's a little after 6, so I'm going to start the June 3rd, 2025 Charter Revision Commission meeting. If you could all rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Bear with me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go into public audience, I just have a couple of things to say, and then we'll go into public audience. And Bob is coming this evening, correct?
He should be arriving any moment
Yep.
now.
So first and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending all the time that we spend volunteering for the community and doing this. It's a very important piece, and I just wanted to thank you all for doing that. It is, based on our last conversation, it's our charge was to come up with a draft to the Board of Selectmen by August 1st, and it's very evident that that's not going to happen based on where we are in the conversation. I would like to send a written notification to the Board of Selectmen that we're not going to meet that deadline, and that deadline is not a statutory deadline. It is their request, but we don't have to meet that deadline by the state statute. And I think it's really important to note that we've heard a lot of public audience and have had a lot of testimony from commissioners and boards and chairs, and we want to make sure we're taking everything into consideration when we're reviewing the charter, and we want to take our time doing this to make sure we get it right, because you only get to do this every 10 years. So unless anybody has an objection, I would like to just communicate formally to the Board of Selectmen. You get to sit by the cookies, Bob.
Bob,
I'm not gonna sit by the
Right here.
cookies.
Nobody wants that.
I just want to just communicate formally to the board that we're doing the best job that we can, and that we've heard a lot of input, and we want to make sure that we're taking all that into consideration, and we don't have a deadline that we can give them yet for the draft, because we just are starting to get into the meat of things, but we are not making August 1st.
just point of clarification, Chair, it's every 7 years.
7
charter.
years, sorry.
It's just not 10 for the record.
Okay. So does anybody object to me communicating that?
Not at all.
No.
I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, so I'm just going to formally send it to the Board of
Do we
Selectmen.
know what our statutory deadline is?
We have 16 months
16 months, okay. And
from the time that this...
so it hasn't even been 12 yet.
No. But I think that we owe them, because that was a request, we owe them a response, and here we are, it's the beginning of June, and August 1st is not going to happen for the first draft.
No, when we first started, I thought August 1st was doable. But when we got the testimony that we did, and especially our charge to clarify the two roles, we need the extra time. That's what I think.
So I'm just going to do that, if that's all right with everybody.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Would it be appropriate to tell the Board of Selectmen that more pizza nights?
Well, they're robbing us with cookies tonight. No. I don't know where the cookies came from.
Whose cookies are those?
They were here. They could be from the school cafeteria. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
But they make good cookies.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, Paul. So, Paul, we were just discussing how I'm going to notify the Board of Selectmen that we're not going to make the August 1st requested deadline. Okay. So the next thing on our agenda is public audience. We have no comments from public audience. We had 2 comments that Franklin submitted to us in writing that will be made part of public record. And we can move on to the next thing. So I want to thank Town Council for doing some additional research for us. And I wanted to give him some time at the beginning of our meeting to review his findings before we start discussing the sections that were on our agenda this evening. So thanks, Bob. And have another cookie if he needs. Pass him over.
Don't need another cookie. There were a couple questions that I read from the minutes. As you know, last time I had to go over the inland wetlands and monitor that meeting, so I had to read the minutes to look at what you were looking for. Working with Frank, of course. The first issue was, I believe it was staggered terms. And then I sent the Marlboro Town Charter, and it's so much easier now to get the town charters, because they're all on E-code, most of them are on E-code. And it's just a question of Googling different charters, pull pieces out of it, cut and paste. It's a lot easier than it used to be. And as you can see in Marlborough, in reading their charter section, it appears as though they used to have a 3-member board of selectmen. And the way they did their staggering of terms is they just added 2 new selectmen to be elected in May 2022 to join the 3 selectmen then holding office under the prior charter to form a 5-person board, and then 3 selectmen to be elected in November 2023. Starting in 2025, 2 selectmen will be elected to office every 4 years, 3 selectmen to be officed. So that's how they did it. Here, it's a little bit more difficult, as you see from the draft language I sent. What's that? Back here? First one. Yeah, and I went over this pretty carefully, but I'm not 100% sold that it's exactly what it needs to be, so I'm looking for input. But it really, to stagger the terms, we have to make changes to section 301 and 302. And as you can see how I did it, in 301, I always find that when you're drafting some language for a statute, regulation, charter, it's best just to come out and say it without trying to sound like a lawyer. So I added the language in section 301, beginning with the municipal election to be held 2027, the Board of Selectmen will serve for staggered terms of 4 years as defined in section 302, period. And then you can see I lined out the except for Board of Selectmen earlier in that section, which talks about 2-year terms. I don't know whether you'll hit the 2027 election for this, because that presumes this charter is approved no later than 2026, which is right around the corner. So I'm just using 2027 because I think that's the earliest it could possibly be done. So then in 302, I struggled with this a little bit to make it readable, but the way it ended up is A is where we say there are 3 members of the Board of Selectmen to serve 2-year terms to be elected in 2027, and then at the meeting in the election in 2029, those 3 members will then be elected to a 4-year term. So you've got 3 members in 2027 that will be elected for 2-year terms, and then in B, you'll see that the first selectman and the 2 other members of the Board of Selectmen are elected in 2027 for 4-year terms, which means they won't come up again for re-election to 2031. The 2-year term people will be elected a 4-year term in 2029, which means they come up for re-election in 2033. So I think that's how, starting in 2033, you really get the staggering of terms, because 3 and the 2 plus the first selectman will stand for election 2 years apart from each other. I think that works.
So who makes the decision on that? Should the board choose?
Well, there'll be 3 seats available in 2027 for the board. Well, there'll be 6 seats available, but 3 of the 6 will have to stand for election for 2-year terms, and presumably that will go through the same nomination. They're different offices,
No,
essentially.
what I'm saying, who's going to be the 3 that get the first 4-year term? Shall we state that the current boards shall select 3 members for?
The parties.
Yeah, the party would nominate to the 2-year term.
They have to nominate specifically
Yeah,
to
just to the
the
2-year
length
term.
of time.
Yeah, and then
You gotta
they
nominate them
to the
anyways,
4-year
yeah.
term.
Oh, okay.
So you would just be saying whether it's a 2 or a 4-year,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So if an unaffiliated person gets enough signatures and gets into the process, they have to choose whether they're
They
selecting
would
4 or
have to
2.
choose a 2-year term or 4-year term in
So,
2027.
We're not going to carry any of the current 6 into a 4-year term. Everybody, we're going to start with the fresh elections and everybody
Yeah, I
starts
don't know how
again.
you would do that.
Because how do you pick who gets to
That's
stay?
what I
Yeah.
said, someone's got to, yeah,
If you put everybody in a 4-year term, then it doesn't stagger. So
right. Okay.
You have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah,
It's only the first election.
that's right. It's only in
Right.
2027. And then those three have to stand for re-election in 2 years, which is not too much of a hardship, because that's what everybody does today.
Anyway, yeah.
So I think this does, as of 2029, I think this results in
Yeah.
staggered terms for Board of Selectmen.
So then we have the same situation unless you're going to put on the ballot, elect for 4 years, elect for 2 years.
That's what the ballot
Exactly what
label
The
will
ballot will
read.
have
Okay.
to say.
Yep.
Yeah, it has to be
For a
clear.
2-year term, the following, for a 4-year term, the
That's what I would
following.
say.
Okay.
And that's, I think boards of ed do that, maybe not here, but other places, there's 2-year terms and 4-year terms. So it's not that
No,
unusual.
but sometimes when you fill a vacancy, like the
Yes.
ballot will say
2 years.
2-year term.
You're filling the
Yeah.
rest of the 2
Yeah.
years or the
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah, if somebody was elected for a 4-year term and then they resigned, they would, during that period, they would then go on the next municipal ballot
That's correct.
for a 2-year term,
For the balance.
for the balance.
Yes.
Even though it was a 4-year term that person who resigned was originally elected to, at the next municipal election, that person is on for a 2-year term. That's how they do it.
So a couple of things to clarify in this draft, if we were to accept this draft. We need to remove in 301A Economic Development Commission because it's not an elected board. That's an appointed board.
Right.
So we need to remove that from the draft.
I would say so. And you also need to say, except the Board of Finance
And then,
and the Library Board of Trustees, which we can talk about at another point.
I had a note,
So the Board of Finance is defined below in 3.
No, in this case, it just, you're
I
cutting
see,
out
I see.
accept and
Yeah.
it should stay with the other one.
it should stay.
Oh, yes, yes.
And then in 301B7
Yes, I see what you're saying, got to leave the word accept in there.
for ZBA,
Yep,
at one point you had mentioned that the state statute says that there are 5 members and we have it as 6.
correct. Special act.
So we don't have to change that to align with the state statute.
No, because essentially the Simsbury Zoning Board of Appeals was grandfathered in by virtue of the special act.
Okay.
We looked at that maybe last time around. That was an issue that's come up from time to time, and the special act is very clear that notwithstanding any statute or charter, the zoning board of appeals shall have 6 members. So that can stay the way it is.
But we could make them an appointed board if we wanted to.
We sure could, yeah.
Same thing with the Board of Assessment Appeals.
Yes,
Yeah.
Now, you can't do that with zoning, right?
sure you can.
Or you do it with all of them?
Yeah. You know, a lot of towns have appointed zoning boards.
Okay, like the Board of Library Trustees, that's got 9.
It's a lot of
Sort
people,
like,
man.
Why 9?
Yeah, to your point though, some of these, like, it's got someone who was chair at one point, like, finding candidates for Board of Assessment Appeals can be a little tough
For a
sometimes.
elected position versus.
That's what I mean, that's
yeah.
exactly what I mean, that's what.
Yeah, it's unusual to have an elected board of assessment appeals, I think. And,
But we could recommend a change,
sure,
because I know one of the charges was to look at boards and commissions
Yep.
and who is elected, who's appointed, and who needs to just not be a commission anymore.
But that would be for a separate
As a separate
Yes.
meeting, yes.
So it sounds like 301B might be, is subject to change depending on what we decide
We
on.
decide to do later.
Right.
That's correct.
But I think the language, in my opinion, as a layperson, I understand what this means in terms of who's being elected when and how. It's not too legal. Like where
Yeah.
the average person's not gonna understand what's
Yeah.
being said
that was the goal. The goal was to make it
sometimes.
Yeah.
understandable so that you wouldn't
Yeah.
have to have a law degree to read the charter.
Plain language is good.
One thing this doesn't address is the question of the losing candidate for first select. And whether that person bumps one of the other candidates for board.
Yep.
If so, would it be only one of the 4-year
No, it would be the two, because it actually does address it in the form of the reference to general statutes. Where is it? 9-189. That's the statute that says the losing candidate, their high vote getter. You can take that out, but right now, that leaves status quo.
So the general statute says the or the candidate who does not get that position gets
If they're
to
one
be on
of
the
the top
board.
vote getters.
Gets to be on the board.
In this case, of the three that would run in that group.
So that was a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that person, assuming he or she gets more votes than the other two candidates, or one of the,
Would take one of the
takes
seats.
a four-year
One of the
slot.
seats.
Would take a
Subject
4-year
to the
slot.
majority or the minority rule.
Yes, correct.
It also doesn't address whether the Board of Selectmen selects who the first select person is.
Yeah, in looking through the different charters, it's silent on that. And the way Glastonbury at least does it, they do it in their town council powers section under organization. And I've included that as well in the emails. And the Glastonbury charter is silent as to it has a similar section, who's elected, who's appointed, and very similar language to 301 and 302. Doesn't say anything about who's the chair, it just says there shall be 9 people elected to the town council. And then you look at section 302, and when they define what happens at the organizational meeting, the charter says, and they shall pick a chair and vice chair. So it's not in the elective office section of the charter, it's in the organizational section of the town council.
Because it's not in this section for any other commission either, like for anybody else to choose the chair.
Right.
Right.
But,
I assume they have 2-year terms for
They have
Glastonbury?
2-year terms,
Okay,
yes.
I was wondering if they were doing the first selectman every 2 years, but 4-year terms.
Yes. And I'm
But they
fam-
select their chair every two
Yes.
years at the organizational meeting.
Yeah, and I was on the Glastonbury Town Council for
That's a lot of change.
I can personally testify how it's done. You know, there's a caucus after the election, and, you know, it's usually a high vote getter, and that gets appointed as the chair at the organizational meeting, so.
I just want to make sure I heard you. So it's 4-year terms, but they select the chair?
2-year terms.
2 years.
No, 2-year terms.
I thought
Okay,
they were
yeah,
staggered.
okay.
Because you have new people who come on.
Yeah.
That's why.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes a high vote getter is a totally new person, so they sometimes deviate from that rule to pick a seasoned veteran to be the chair of the council, who is the chief elected official.
Right.
Glastonbury.
But we're gonna have an even number of selectmen, but we're gonna have an unequal number in the party, right? So it'll probably go to the party regardless of who
More than likely.
the vote
Yeah.
getter was.
Yeah.
but did we didn't get any public comments seeking that kind of a change. I don't think that the public is thinking of handing over the right to choose the first selectman to the Board of Selectmen.
The only people I recall we got comments from were selectmen.
That's
But
right,
it was also in our charge, though, to look at that,
right?
to have that. And also, you know, the other boards elect their chairs.
Mm-hmm.
The Board of Ed elects their chair, and they have 80% of the budget.
No, I get that, but that's how it has been. And if we are going to make a big change like this, it needs to be socialized because people are used to choosing their first selectman. It's an elected position that has been that way for a long time. If we were to have take an elected position and change it to an appointed position, we're taking away the ability for people to choose democratically their first selectman. It's a big change.
This will be voted on, right? So that's
Yeah.
all going to happen. That'll be out
This
there
is
for
on
people.
our agenda for tonight, for.
Yes,
Yeah.
This is just discussion. This is
That's
just
it. This is
discussion.
just
But it's
discussion.
not necessarily part of the discussion of how we establish that.
And I don't mind if, or I'm sorry to, I think I'm jumping back, but I just want to make sure your math is right. So an 8-member board, but we talk about 3 members and then 4
We're
members.
6 members.
Six
We're
members.
6
6
member.
members.
We're six
Yeah.
on
Board of
board.
Ed's 8.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
You have extra
I've been
people.
in this
Right
room-
brain,
I've been in
left
this
brain.
room too long. So, all right, wait, maybe I'm the one that's got the map. I'm sorry.
We do Class A,
know what that is.
first selectman and 2 board members, and we do Class B, which is
Right.
3 board members. And
Right, and Class A
Eventually.
starts off with a 4-year.
With a
term.
4-year term.
Yeah.
And Class B, because my thinking was you couldn't have the first selectman in the 2-year term group
Yeah.
because they would not have.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Class A is 4-year board of selectmen.
Whatever it takes.
Losing candidate, if their top vote getter more than the other 2, would be one of the 2 4-year members of the board of
Yeah.
selectmen.
So let me play devil's advocate. So you have 3 people running for Class A, so for 4-year terms.
6 probably, right?
Well, yeah.
3.
And then you've got additional people running for 2-year terms. Wonder if the 2-year term people get more votes than the 4-year term people.
Good question.
Different class.
So they
Wrong
can't,
question.
it's not like they step into it
I don't
because
think so. I
you're
think-
running for a
Right.
specific position.
Yes,
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and
The
that's what
office-
the public knows.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how they vote, right?
The office is Board of Selectmen for a 4-year term.
Right.
The other office is Board of Selectmen for 2-year terms.
I mean, so in theory, you could have
the
6 running for
classes merge.
4-year terms and 6 running for 2-year terms because the parties can put up.
No.
No.
No, not in the same election.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about that.
Well, wait a
It's
minute.
tricky because you
Why
have
would
4
that-
on the board total from
But
one
that's
party.
because
There
they're
would
only
be
the
3
first year.
slots.
First time.
Right.
Right.
There's 3 slots, but there could be 6 candidates
There will be
For
6
each class.
candidates.
for each class.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Right now, there's 12 candidates for 6 spots.
So you're going to have 6 candidates for Class A. And if only 3 of those top vote getters, I mean, one's going to be running, I mean, 2 of those slots are for first selectman position. The other 4 people are running for a position on the board. So it's only the 2 top vote getters of that class that get in, correct? I'm just thinking down the line, not 2027, but
The
later.
Class A,
I see where
which
you're
is the
going.
first selectman and the 4-year termers, there'll be 4 people running for Board of Selectmen in Class A, and 2 people running for first selectman in Class A. And the winners will be whoever wins the election for first selectman. And then of the 5 people who ran for the 2 slots, they'll be the top vote getters for those 2 slots.
Right. So it could be the other candidate for first, and then
And
one other
one
person.
other person.
That's correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then Class B,
Which is in 2 years.
yeah,
'Cause
well,
they're not-
the Class B only exists for that first
For the first year.
For the first time.
election. Also for the second, because nobody's running in 2029. The 4 years, people don't run again in 2029, so it's only the 3 2-year termers. Class B runs in 2000.
Right, so I'm just thinking of the first time this happens, where we're electing everybody. And you've got the 6 people in the A's running, so you've got 3 and 3, or what, whatever the case may be, and then you've got 3 and 3 for the Class B. There is a potential that a Class B candidate gets more votes than a Class A candidate,
Yep,
right?
Could be, sure.
But because they're running for, I just want to be clear, because they're running for a specific position, they don't get on the board.
They don't, well,
They have the potential of not,
They wouldn't get the 4.
they wouldn't get
would
the.
they wouldn't get a 4-year
They wouldn't
term.
get the 4-year
They're
term.
running just for the
They're just
2-year.
running for the 2-year
They also
term.
don't knock out the
Yes.
losing candidate
Right.
for selectman. I think that's the more likely possibility.
Right.
The Class B candidate is very popular, gets all kinds of votes, but comes in 4th in Class B, but doesn't knock out the losing first selectman
Because they're a 4-year.
because they're different office.
It's a different office.
The other issue is do we still have the rules that you can't have more than 4 of a majority party in it?
Yes.
So it could be that Class A could be all one party, and then the next Class
And
B
then by
can only
default,
be one of that party.
Minority
no matter the votes.
representation rule would apply to both classes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so you have to do it for
To
each
the board,
class.
it would apply to
It's
the
got
whole
the
Yeah,
board.
okay,
yeah.
so no more than two on each.
So it'd be 2 and 2 for each class.
So then,
That would be-
so then how's that
Well-
going forward now that you're staggered, right? So now you have 2 and 1, and then say the other party comes in and they prevail. So would they only get 2 or would they get all 3? So
They
they
can't get all
Theoretically, you
three.
could go.
So you could-
Sure.
Well, let's think.
So then it
about
would
that.
stay,
Then there'd be one class of 6.
right?
No more than 5 could be from one party, so that might change the map. Oh,
No
wait a minute,
more
it's
than
not gonna-
4.
No more than 4.
4.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have, you start with two in Class A of one party and then one of the other. In the next time around, so 2 and 2, so you have 4 starting out. The next time, the 2-year people come up, and if the party that was in the minority is now in the majority, how do they get, if they only get 2 in there, they would still be in the minority. So it would be still 3 and 4, or it'll be 3 and 3.
But we're also just
Yeah.
assuming that it's only 2 parties that are running. There could be a third party.
I know, I'm just trying to figure out how, are we creating a situation where the party that wins in the first time could never
Oh,
get,
sure, there's a strategy there, absolutely.
could
right?
never
I mean,
get out
Yeah.
of position,
You
because
could-
they always will have,
Yeah, I mean, you could,
Good game.
theoretically, you could load up on put your strongest 3 in the
first
the
one.
4-year cycle, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that
But
will
that still
eventually
doesn't
work
give you
itself
more than
out,
4
right?
seats.
No, right,
It's
exactly,
still
no,
not
no,
gonna give you more
exactly,
than 4 seats.
absolutely, and
Because
that's what I think we gotta keep in mind,
you
is
have
at
a
the end of the day, it
majority
still doesn't affect that end
Class
number.
A, and then,
Right. And the Workers' Party could slide in there and get 1, and
Do we need to be more specific in this transition year in the charter to make sure that it's not misinterpreted what our intention was for that first go-around with Class B and Class A?
I think it's now up to the parties to figure out how to,
But do we need to mention that the different classes in the terms, or
well,
no?
no.
No.
Okay, I just don't want to leave it for interpretation of the town clerk, in 2027, trying to figure out who's on first.
That's Bob's job.
Well, Bob's gonna still be here.
Okay,
What is that again?
Franklin, aren't you going to go to law school?
okay. So are we,
I think you're creating a situation where you're gonna have, you may have equal representation, 3 and 3.
Could be, that's happened.
Even though that the prevailing party, because they can't take 3 seats.
On one
to
class.
Become a
Yeah,
majority.
no, it may
Do we
well
wanna
over
do that?
time make
might
it
not
more
necessarily
difficult
be a bad thing.
to have a resounding victory for one party or the other. Because if you think about it, in any given election, you're only gonna win no more than 2 seats.
Right. And if you only had 1 seat in the other side, you would,
I guess that's, after it settles out, you're still running for 6 seats.
Yeah, it's
But-
only until it settles and
Bless
then.
you.
Bless you.
here's a question. In this first election, where there's Class A and Class B, it might be, because of the separate classes, it might be in one party's interest, or each party's interest, to run a slate of 6 candidates, whereas we usually run 4. But in order to make sure we get a majority, we'd want to run 6, so that, if it breaks out 2 and 2, we still get the 4 seats. How do we determine, let's assume, for the sake, for hypothetically, that my party sweeps the table, runs the table, and gets the 6 top vote getters? How do we determine which 2 seats go to the minority party?
because they're running for that
You
office.
do it within each class.
So-
Class B, it would be, even if in Class B,
So you're saying only the 2 top vote getters, or?
Per class.
I'm not sure that's right, because
No, I don't think that's right either, because what if we got 5? The 5 top vote getters.
Then the next highest from the other party
Right,
would get that seat.
You can only,
whichever class they were in.
yes,
I see, so that knockoff thing. So in that way, it's possible that, well, I guess it doesn't matter.
you could have.
Well, I think, but I think
It
also
really
is how,
doesn't have-
so the ballot, right, would say the I'm getting Class A and Class B confused, so bear with me. So I'm assuming the 4-year terms would be first on the ballot. So let's say one party
Right.
sweeps all 3. The most they can get then in the 2 years is 1.
No,
Because it's. a
because it's
different
by class.
The most they can get in the first.
They can-
No, because the board, you can only get 4 total.
Yeah.
It's not by class, it's by
Board.
the board.
In other words, they can only place,
Right, so you
Even
can
if they
then
win the
only
election.
get
Even-
one of
even if
those
you-
remaining 3.
It's the distinction between the
Right.
election and the composition of the
Yeah,
board.
right,
We
exactly.
wouldn't want to make a rule that has Class
Right.
A
But I
and B
don't
for
see
one
why
round.
that's a problem.
Later on, it'd be fine.
Right.
I mean,
As
I
long as
think
it's-
that's
But
just a fact.
also, the parties would know, okay, look, there's 3 seats up, okay? We already control
Right.
3 seats. So the most we could get is 1.
Yeah.
So we're not going to waste 3 candidates here.
Absolutely.
We're going to put up 1. We know we're going to get 1. And then we're going to take those 2 candidates and we're going to put them on another board where we think we could take the majority or take something else. You don't want to waste a good quality candidate if you're subject to the minority rule
I'm not,
or the majority rule.
I'm not going to give away my parties. But thank you.
So,
You're welcome.
here we are.
Have a cookie.
To throw in the other mix here, when you have an independent, not independent party, but an unaffiliated, let me make sure I get that right. Are they considered a majority of the party? Let's just say all of a sudden we get this influx of unaffiliateds. They only can get 4 seats as well,
Any party can only get 4.
but they're not a
4 seats. It
party.
doesn't matter.
But they're not a party, and I know this is a big issue we've been talking about, is unaffiliated.
It doesn't apply to unaffiliated.
So you could have a board of 6 unaffiliated voters.
You could.
Okay, I'm just making sure
Hey,
that,
if they want to get together and find a way to do that, go for it.
I'm just asking.
It's democracy.
It is.
Yeah, but the way the statute reads, it's no more than X from any one political party.
Party.
So unaffiliated is not a political party.
Right, right. Unless they establish a minor party, then the rule would apply.
Or if they run as
Connecticut party.
independents. 'cause
Well, that's
there is
right.
That's why I wanted to use that word,
party.
unaffiliated versus independent.
Is there different thresholds? It doesn't matter what part, you could be from the Mars party, I don't know, like whatever party. You still have the same thresholds of getting on the ballot with signatures, no matter if you're unaffiliated, independent, the purple party, the green party, whatever. Okay.
And, minor parties, so-called minor parties, like a Connecticut party was a minor party, Will Weiker's creation. They were on line 1 for many years because Weicker did so well in the gubernatorial election. So that's all part of the political process.
And the working party is usually on the ballot.
Working parties on the ballot.
Take the
the
Green
Independent
Party.
The Green Party,
That was Ralph Nader's party, right?
I think so.
I think so.
So just so I recall again, next time I'm gonna vote, I'm really gonna look at the ballot. If you're unaffiliated, I look at the young, I didn't say that right, but meaning like who's on what party, if you're unaffiliated, you're not under any DIR, Green Party, Working Party.
They're separate
It's a
lines.
totally
Just a
separate
separate
line,
line.
okay. I know we don't have a
Separate
lot
line.
usually in the voting, we do in
No, it's just a separate
elected
line
boards,
item.
or,
Right.
Like in the same spot
You'd
where
be
you do
on
a
line
write-in.
C.
Right, yeah.
okay.
So then a party could take, in the two different A and Bs, they could take all 3. If they only had 1 seat in the A and they were running for Bs, they would take 3 and become 4, or if there was 2, I don't know, 2 and unaffiliated, they could still take
Yeah.
3.
I think so.
Okay, so it wouldn't be restricted to, you could only take 1 of the, or 2 of the 3. As long as they don't exceed the 4
Right.
total.
If they're a party,
Exactly.
yeah, okay.
Just to tie a bow on it.
That's getting confusing. I don't know if we have to write that out somehow.
We talked about in which something could happen that couldn't happen now under the system we have now.
Right.
So that these are interesting scenarios, but none of them is a reason not to do exactly what
Right.
you're proposing.
We're not creating an opportunity for one party or another.
That's right.
Still among the board and
We
creating
will be
two
creating
pseudo-classes.
new opportunities for the parties to try to gain the election, but that's part of the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. And that's what we were asked to do. We were
Yeah.
asked to
Yeah,
do
right.
this, so we have to figure out a way to get it done.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
read
Okay,
through it, think
moving on.
about it.
I already
Thank
know
you.
what
Okay. So we're gonna go to
401,
401.
403, 411.
411.
Just to finish up, the other thing I gave you, I think, was sections of the Glastonbury Charter.
Yep.
It's here.
Yep. About the organization.
Glastonbury. Well, maybe I didn't give it to you, but we'll get to it. They have a really good, council members can't interfere with the town manager section.
Oh, that was the 501?
Yeah.
You were gonna get something to us, and I think you guys are still working on it?
Yeah, we're still working on it, but we can send it to you. I like the way it reads. It's clearer, but more comprehensive. I think it's clear what the members of the town council cannot do. Makes it clear, for instance, that asking a question at a town council meeting of a director is not interfering. And so we'll put that together. We'll send it to you just as a model of a different way to accomplish the same purpose. It seems like every
If you
charter.
when you write it up, though, remember, we're not a council, we're a
Of
board of
course,
selectmen.
yes,
Yeah.
of course. It seems like every charter has some version of that. And you read enough of these charters, you start to see similarity to a lot of things that are talked about here, so.
So 401 is really the question of the hour about electing a first selectman or appointing a first selectman. Because this speaks about how the first select person is elected, how they're compensated, that they're appointing a deputy.
Yeah, there are a lot of responsibilities for the first select person that the members of our town get to vote on. And I am in favor of giving the voting population the right to choose the first selectman, because look at what the select person gets to do.
I agree. I mean, I don't know if we want to go around the room and take a poll of who believes that we should change the way the first select person is chosen. I mean, there's pros and cons to both, but it's like, this seems to be working, and we're already changing the way we're voting, the term limit, the terms, and that's a lot of change.
It's a lot of change, so I'll be the first one to make my stand. I'm not in favor of taking away an individual's, a citizen's right to choose their form of government. If they had this, then I would rather have them continue having this than to take that away from them, even if it may be more efficient. That's their democratic right to choose their first select person. And it also makes the select person work harder to be chosen by the voting population as opposed to by a small group. Additionally, what if somebody shows up from nowhere and gets on the board of selectmen but has no knowledge of the other people on that board, and that person could have been the first selectman, but the board doesn't know about them, right? It's much better to have the people choose them than to have a board of 9 choose them, and that is the stand that I'd like to take on this.
Well, and if there's an opportunity always, and it exists now, where the first selectman could be of one party and the majority could be another on the board. It doesn't typically happen, but it
But
can
yeah.
happen.
It's happened.
Yeah, and it
It's
could be-
happened in the past.
Yeah, it has
But-
happened, and the people should be the ones to choose this.
Yeah.
This is the face of our town.
Right, because in theory, if we allow the Board of Selectmen to choose the person, it's going to be the majority party is going to be choosing realistically someone from their party.
That's right.
But we've created a situation where you can have an equal board. Now with the two different terms, you could end up with 3 and 3. So you could have an impasse. The way it is now, you're always going to have 4 and 2.
Well, they have to
No,
pick somebody, though. And
You have to pick
typically,
somebody.
just like
Who?
the Board of Ed,
Conclave.
Yeah, right. The white
the
smoke.
Board of Ed chooses their chair. They control 80% of the budget, and those people are all elected. I know we've had discussions about it, and typically that's a bipartisan thing, so they work it out, they figure out who it is. The point about somebody going on the board who would have no experience, but they could still become the first. I mean, right now, you have, in a lot of ways, it's a popularity contest, and you can have somebody who gets elected to be first who has no experience, no municipal experience, or limited municipal experience, and all of a sudden, they're running the town. So I don't see any real
So it's probably
difference.
more
But has
likely that
that-
that person, that scenario would come up in today's structure for exactly the same, the reason you're outlining. At least if they were appointed or elected, selected, whatever word you want to use, by their peers, those peers are not going to select somebody that has no experience or is too green.
But
that
should
part
we
won't
take that
happen.
away from the electorate? Because the electorate has
Well,
the
that's a separate
capacity
question.
to
I'm
make
just trying to
that.
get to your scenario of this individual just coming in.
I
No,
think we've seen that the risk of unqualified people comes up under any scenario.
Absolutely.
My concern, which I've expressed before, is I think we want to make the Board of Selectmen function efficiently in its role of supervising the town staff and the town manager. And I think that will happen most efficiently if the first selectman has a defined and primary role as the interface between those two, and also as the public face of the town. And I think all of that argues for the separate election of the first selectman. So that's why I support that separate election.
I don't disagree 100% in that regard. I think, and my position's evolving a little on this. Currently, under Section 11, the first select person is the chief elected officer, right? Their role is as the head of the Board of Selectmen, the legislative body, to set the agenda, to help set the strategy, and I think that board currently has enough supervisory authority to work with the town manager, and they just don't know it's there and they don't use it. So originally I was thinking we needed to strip the town manager of the chief executive role, make them the chief administrative officer, make the first selectman the chief executive officer, like Canton has, okay? And I'll be the first to say I was not in favor of the town manager concept at the last charter, all right? But I don't think we need to do away with it. I think we need to make some tweaks to it, and I think we need to make some tweaks to maybe how the staff gets their information from the town staff, how the boards, like the chair of zoning or finance, gets their information on a timely basis. But if we go along and say the first selectman should be elected by the voters, then that's fine. Then I think there's no reason to make them then the chief executive officer. I see that as a bigger change than keeping them as the chief elected officer and saying, look, you have authority in this charter already. You're just not using it.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's my opinion.
Well, I think we're probably going to end up pretty close when it comes to 411 and figuring out how to define the role of the first. We may not be identical, but I don't think we'll be that far apart. But that's a separate issue. My concerns about that are the primary reason why I think the first selectman should be elected. And on that issue, I don't know if anybody disagrees.
Will there be, if, and again, I like to look at both sides and discuss it like we all do. If we went to the board nominates and appoints a chair, would that then prevent potentially more people from not running for Board of Selectmen? Because there is a potential of, I don't want that responsibility, and.
Well, they can always say decline.
Right,
and say,
but then it's now back to a popularity vote versus who's the best person. Because they can't put the time, I mean, there's a massive time commitment on the Board of Selectmen as it is. And everyone goes, it'd be everyone else but me, and then we don't have the best person for that scenario.
That's right.
I mean, I think historically,
That's a
the
good
town
point.
of Simsbury has a very, the residents and taxpayers are very involved in the town goings-ons and boards and commissions, and they care. They care about the town, and to take that ability to vote for somebody who they think is the leader of the town, the spokesperson, the outward-facing, kissing babies and shaking hands kind of person. I think we'd be remiss to take that away from them, because they're very passionate. I mean, we all are, because we're sitting here, right? We love our town. I wouldn't want that right taken away from me.
No, I would like to choose, and also the person who wants to be Board of Selectmen is running for, to be First Selectman is running for First Selectman. So you
Well, it's
already
a commitment
have
that
commitment.
they've chosen.
Yeah.
They've made the commitment.
A big
And the
commitment.
people get to decide whether, and it's not one person who's running and no one else, right? It's not a North Korean election. There are two people running. And people get to decide who that person is going to be.
Well, and there may
So
be
they have
people
to work
who
hard.
are quite capable of becoming first selectmen, but for personal reasons can't fulfill those obligations because of work commitments or family commitments, so they choose not to run for that role, right? And so you don't want to have them sitting on a board where now all of a sudden, because they're the most competent person, they're being nominated for the job and they don't want it.
Right.
They didn't want it to begin with.
Decline.
They
Yeah.
can
Always
decline.
decline.
Say it for
I
that
know.
reason. I appreciate it, but I'm too busy.
Well,
In the last
that's
charter, we did take the first selectman and turn it into a different first selectman role, right? We took away a lot of those.
We didn't take away the right to vote for
Because
it.
they went to the
Yeah.
town manager.
Yeah, so we did change it a lot, but outwardly, we still have the first selectman with kind of a representative.
Well, does anybody see any particular advantage in having the first selectman selected by the other members of the board as opposed to being elected separately?
So I don't, and I think we're kind of tasked with making meaningful changes and identifying issues and changes on those. And I guess based on what we heard, I didn't really see this as a huge issue. So I don't know if we want to make changes for change's sake or if we're making them because an issue's been identified and we need to tweak something so that everything functions better. And I just think this would be a big one that probably wouldn't sit well with a lot of people. And then it takes away from the other work we're doing.
We do get locked into the 4-year cycle, though, which I think maybe people don't realize yet, where you're only making the election for the first selectman every 4 years. You're having that election in between where people come to vote and the first selectman's not on the ballot. You have to wait for the other cycle. I guess
That's what they signed
the
up
council
for.
would resolve that only because you could keep doing the staggered elections, but then every 2 years there may be choosing the chair. But that's still
That's how
indirect.
Avon does it every 2 years.
First selectman is every 2 years, or?
It's selected by the council.
Oh, if it remains as a voter-selected first selectman, then I guess that's two things that come up. I would think you would probably want that election, because it's always going to be in either A or B. It's never going to shift once you make a choice. That should be in a year of a presidential election. That's when you're going to have the most people show up.
Municipal election.
Or on the off year.
The off year.
Yeah, but we're going 4-year cycles now.
Yeah.
But it's always gonna be still gonna be the off.
It's always going to be an off year. Okay, it's never,
And that's
okay.
state law.
Oh, okay. Don't you have to worry about that. But, so then the
There
other,
would be a lot of
the other
politics in
other
there.
thing, yeah, okay.
By the end of the ballot, it's higher.
But more voters.
If someone is in the, say, the B cycle, where they don't ever gonna have a chance to run for first selectman, if they were 2 years in, they could say, hey, I wanna run for first selectman, and what would happen then? Would they leave their seat if they're not elected? Or would they, if they don't get elected, they would stay?
It would create a vacancy and
So they'd have to,
But they might still end up.
they'd have to
in
resign
Class A.
to run, or no?
well, they would run in the middle of their term,
Right.
so they wouldn't have to resign, but they couldn't serve, if they won, they
Right.
couldn't serve in both
Both.
capacities.
So if they won, then that seat's going to open up anyway, so I guess then you got to figure out how you're going to backfill that
But
one.
if they lose, I
They would
don't
just
think
stay.
they would
Or no?
lose their seat on the.
No, it's kind of like when a senator runs for
That's right.
president.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Same thing.
Well, then how we got, so then,
No,
would-
they never resign.
then
They're
we're
there
gonna,
forever.
So in some states, they have to.
then potentially we're going to create
Oh, I'm
an
gonna
open
send you a
seat
meme.
in that.
I don't have
So
my
would there be a
phone.
special
I know,
election
I'll
for
send
that?
you- see you
Or
later.
how would that?
Yeah, if they run and they win, then we'd have to look at the appointment section for elected of office, but I think they would have to, is there a special, I don't remember if there's a special election.
It would depend upon where they are in that cycle, whether there's a special election. If it's not in that, as I understand it, if it's not within the cycle that they have to run, or under a special election, then the party from that person can appoint a replacement who has to then run on the next municipal election.
Yes, well, it would always be 2 years into their term. If the 4-year board member says, you know what, I want to be first selectman, they would run, and if they won, they'd become first selectman, creating a vacancy, and I think
And then that party would choose,
to serve out the term.
serve out the term, subject to the majority rule, minority rule.
Well, no, because the party would have to appoint from the party that created the vacancy.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And no one's commented on making a 7-person board and just having.
I guess, just as long as we get all these scenarios, because you're creating unintended consequences. So
Either
like
that or
create
you go
something
to
where-
everybody runs every 4 years and you don't make it staggered.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
that's
that would be
that's a long
great.
time to be stuck with.
Yeah.
With the long
Solve the issue.
It doesn't solve the continuity issue.
Yeah.
I wasn't advocating for that.
That's
Just
what
trying to
the
figure
biggest-
out
that's
all
why
the
we're doing
potential
it.
scenarios so I don't create a situation
So
where there's-
actually, that brings up a good point. So we can't think of every scenario, right? It's not possible. So let's assume there's an alien invasion and someone decides that they want to run, and something like that happens. It's a scenario none of us ever thought about. Wouldn't we fall back on the general statutes to figure out what the rules?
Bingo.
So that would be for
Let the state figure
Well,
it
the
out.
aliens aren't residents.
That's a state.
They're not residents, so they couldn't
Hey,
run.
if they pay taxes, I'll take them.
So we're okay with 401 then, as written? Can I, and I'll bring up the overall, I know I brought this up early in the charter thing, in our conversation about being called select men and select women. Did we just change our our language throughout the charter to select persons?
Or select human.
Do you do that, or do you say, I did see this in one charter that allowed the person to decide how they wanted to be called, select woman or select man.
But what if they don't want to be called select women or select men? And they want to be called select person because they're gender neutral. I'm just trying to be very,
Well, that's where you say, let that person decide how they wanted to be referred to.
That's a good.
But we do have to
I mean,
refer
the
to
board
the-
gets to choose his name.
But we do have to refer in the charter
we have to
as-
refer to the charter that they can either be
They are-
called
They may be
select men, select women, or select person. And then they can choose what they want to be called.
Select
Right, I
unicorn.
think for the
That would be
ease
the best.
of the document,
Yeah.
select person is probably the
Yeah.
best.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And
Just for
then-
the document, we're just talking the document.
Yeah, I think just
Yeah.
making it general neutral then makes it all encompassing
And then it's up to
less
them.
messy too.
It's up to, then it's up to the person who holds the office to say, I want to be referred to as the
If you
first
wanna be
selectman,
called as-
or I want to be referred to as the first select woman, not the first person.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Right.
a good idea, I like that.
Yeah.
And it's also less messy just to not have this or this or this. Or
Yeah,
it's-
yeah, yeah.
I get cross-eyed after reading one
But
sentence.
in the charter, if we say person, how does it appear on the ballot?
Person.
Board of,
Is it gonna be the Board of Select Persons?
That's where that mayor council comes back in.
that's where council does come in better, huh?
Some towns call it the Select Board,
Or Board of Representatives.
Board of Representatives. There shall be a select board consisting of,
I like select.
I like
Yeah, me
that.
too.
Yeah.
That's how the town of
There's
Dennis
even
does
Board
it.
of Directors.
The members are select persons.
members of
What would
the,
be the chief elected official?
the members would be a member of the Select Board.
Right.
Select Board member.
Maybe the first select board member.
Say that 10 times.
But, I mean, being a select board is nicer, it leaves it open to all,
Including aliens.
Yeah.
if they pay taxes
I
and
think the
not.
important word in it is select, because that has the historical.
Right.
Exactly. I mean,
The select has the
I thought we should
historic.
have a cute name, but there is that, I do appreciate that we're a 350-year-old town and that
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
the selectmen
Yeah.
is part of New England
I think
history.
people would chafe at changing to town council, is my personal opinion.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think select board
There's
is,
a lot of different interpretation of that means.
I like
Yeah.
that.
So where did
Especially
where did we
work-
land on the
Did we
first?
land on select board?
Is
You
it,
can try it,
but
see
is
what
the
it looks
first,
like.
so what's the first though? Is the first, what did we, is it the first select person or is it the
First-
first?
First select person.
Right.
In the
Chief-
text, it
chief
can be,
select.
and then a clarification.
No, don't call me
Yeah.
chief,
By the title.
First Select Board member? That's
Wow.
weird,
that's weird.
Select.
that's weird.
I think we can
No, I
still
like-
call the members select persons.
The board itself.
Self is called the select board.
Yeah.
And that way it's not Board of Selectmen, Board of Select Women, Board of Select People. That sounds
Maybe.
weird.
It's
I like
gotta
select
sound, it's
board.
gotta sound good.
Select board sounds good.
I was incorrect. The town of Dennis, where we have a house, they still call it the Board of Selectmen.
They do, okay. There is some
still have
steep
town meetings on
tradition
Cape, too.
with that too, isn't there?
Well, yeah, because they're from the Mayflower over there.
We are not?
Oh, wait, what?
We are,
What are we here?
we are from Mayflower.
Yeah, are we getting too much in the weeds here on
Okay,
trying to
no, I'm just-
change? You can still call it the Board of Selectmen. Everybody understands it's the Board of Selectmen.
And
And then
then
you
it's the
allow them
first
to
select
decide,
person.
you let them to decide how they want to be referred to, as selectman, select woman, or select person.
I like that. I would agree with that,
I like,
yeah.
New Haven went with the Board of Alders.
Sounds very
And
Michigan.
the members
Not
are
Alders.
just
That's
called
Midwest.
Sound like trees.
Yeah, all
I feel like
those.
Detroit is
There's also the Board of
Alderman.
Elders, too.
Yeah. That's a church.
I know.
That sounds
It'd be
weird.
great to
Board of
advocate
Hops.
Board of Shaws.
I think.
Okay, so let's go to 402 then.
So we're
Presiding-
consensus, select board? Is that,
No,
or
it's
select men?
No.
No, we went back.
Carl will get.
So we're keeping select.
But somehow we have to identify that they can choose what they want to be called. Select men, select women, or select person.
Yeah,
Well, that's included actually in like one of the
The very last section.
sections of the charter. It actually says, it's a catch-all, but that says any
Okay.
term of the gender-specific language can mean all genders and any.
That we don't have to change it.
we have it at the very
Oh,
end.
good. Okay.
Franklin, you just earned your salary.
Yes. Have another cookie.
Okay.
So 402 is
I
presiding.
don't think that's actually what that clause does. So,
According to
I mean,
Frank.
it's not, the point of that clause is that, you know, the use of a masculine term in the charter would apply to a woman as appropriate or to any other person as appropriate. But it doesn't say what title someone should select. So I think we will need that language.
Does it not?
Clever
read
lawyer to
that
make
you
the
could-
argument that because it says,
You could make the argument, but it's
But,
probably better to.
Are we really getting into, like, they can do this today. Like, if,
Right.
you know, I think we're,
I just
there's
brought
a
it up.
difference, no, and I think you're right, but I think that, to me, there's a difference between what we're doing in the document and what they're calling themselves. right now today, if you were on the Board of Selectmen, you could say, no, I'm a select woman. No one's gonna argue that. No one's gonna have an issue with that. We seem to be going down this rabbit hole, and I'm not sure we really have to.
Yeah, I don't think we.
I agree.
Right, okay, let's move on.
402,
402.
presiding officer, organization, and procedure.
So I was reading this, and the third sentence, at the biennial meeting, we need to change that now. Is that not true?
No, there'll always be a biennial meeting.
Okay.
Because every 2 years,
Thank you,
the town's
okay.
electing somebody.
Some new people.
Because they have to come up with their meeting schedule.
Yeah.
Right, they fix the time and place of its regular meetings and provide a method of calling special meetings.
Okay.
Is that biennial meeting the same as the organization meeting in the preceding sentence?
Okay.
So maybe we should call it one thing.
Well, because the sentence before it says organization meeting, and then it says a biennial meeting, so I wasn't sure if that
Can
was
you
the
just
same
call it
thing
the
or not.
biennial organization meeting?
I mean, I know that's semantics, but I thought there was two different meetings there.
Yeah,
Did
no,
you
we
just say
should
something?
we should be consistent in what we call it.
Because it sounds like it's two separate meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is well,
And whatever we decide to call it, could we make it A?
Put it in the appendix. and-
That's right, make it a
Definition.
defined term.
Yes, because it is a little confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing. Somebody mentioned this to me in passing when I was at the coffee spot, that these paragraphs were very difficult to read. So
They are.
if we could simplify it, make it less legal, a little bit more bullet pointy or whatever.
we could definitely take a crack at that. We
Yeah.
could do subsections.
Yes, that would be very.
Well, because we
One-
say
So
first
much better.
selectman, first select person, like 100 times in
Yeah.
one paragraph.
Yeah.
They should do.
Can't we just have, they have to do the following, just like we have the bullet points
For the town
for
manager.
the town manager.
The legislature did that with Section 8-2, which is the Zoning Enabling Act, powers of the zoning commission. It used to read like a James Joyce novel. It went on and on and on and on. And the legislature broke it up into paragraphs, and it's much more readable.
Yeah, this could be broken up in paragraphs.
Yeah.
I
Like the
I highlighted a
subsections.
couple
Yeah.
where it could go. One thing I wanted to point out, at the last charter, we changed where the first select woman or select man could appoint the deputy. And the reason we did that was because the second vote getter, highest vote getter, always got to be the deputy. So sometimes it was a Republican with a first and then the other way around. So some people thought that was a little, that it created tension on the board. So we went to the first would select who that deputy would be. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. When a first selectman made the choice of a member of the other party to be the deputy, that person's party went crazy. Now, so I'm not sure that particular ability shouldn't be just the board checks or selects who the deputy should be.
Does the board have to approve who the deputy is?
No.
No.
Oh,
No.
So they can just choose whoever.
The first can choose
Okay.
whoever. Remember, we had those discussions back and forth? So I'm thinking about it, and I had this highlighted here. Maybe the board should select the deputy. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here on this, but I'd throw that out for discussion, that the board should select the deputy.
Well, but on the flip side, should the first select person choose the deputy because the deputy steps in for the first select person, should the first select person not be able to fulfill their obligation? So they're choosing someone who's aligned with what their vision was instead of,
Is there a deputy in Board of Ed or Board of Finance?
There's a vice
Yeah,
chair.
the
vice chair.
Is that also selected by the chair?
No,
Oh.
so,
Selected by the
by the
board.
board.
But the chairs are also selected by the board.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
But then having the deputy be selected by the board is more brain power than having one person select the deputy. Especially if the deputy is going to have to step in for the first, if something happens to the first. To me, it's a more democratic process.
Sure, but I would also say, as a voter, right, I selected the first selectman of a particular part, doesn't matter which one. if the board potentially really wanted to screw the first selectman or first selectwoman, they could potentially elect somebody from the opposing party. But as a vote, and as Chris said, maybe the first selectman is out for a few weeks, whatever. I didn't vote for the individual in that party. So I think I think the giving the first selectman the ability to keeps it in line with what the voters want.
Well, it's just like the president and the vice president.
Right.
That's,
I mean,
that
kind
is
of.
correct. You know, yeah.
See how that
You
was?
are-
No
you
new
are-
codes, but
That's working out great.
it's working out great.
There have been years, though, when the first selectman was one party, and the majority of the board was another party.
Yep.
So if you let the majority of the board pick the deputy, you could run into some mischief where, you'd have
Either,
You could also run into bipartisanship.
some people call that mischief.
Yeah, I know where you sit.
As a practical matter, the deputy, that is, the first select person has to work closely with the deputy. So,
They have to have a good working relationship.
the politics usually isn't an issue, and it's really more of a question of the personal interactions, and it makes sense to me to let the first select person choose the person that they're going to work with most closely.
Yeah.
I see it both ways, so maybe we shouldn't change it.
But
Okay,
the
let's
other
move on
thing-
then.
Yeah.
Just
Yes,
leave it.
let's move on.
So we're good with this paragraph.
Boy,
No,
this whole
I was on the
paragraph-
second sentence.
No, I mean, we're gonna redraft it.
So I think we're going to define the term organization meeting to mean that meeting that's in the first sentence, and when we get to the third sentence, we
Right.
should change that to organization meeting.
And I think we should dot point a lot of this versus this run-on sentence.
I've got some ideas how to break it up. It does logically break up by topic.
It does. It's easy to break this up.
Yeah.
So when you get down to the section where it talks about the appointed committees,
Where are you?
public safety, personnel
Yeah, thank you.
subcommittee, finance, welfare, and other committees as may be established by the Board of Selectmen, do we have to list the committees? Like EDC is an appointed committee. There's appointed committees that aren't listed on here that we want to take EDC out of the elected piece, but we don't want to take EDC necessarily out of the charter. Do you have to specify all and then put that caveat, or can you just put any boards, any committees as established by the Board of Selectmen, period?
Well, these are committees of the Board of Selectmen, though.
They're sub-boards?
These are the sub-boards?
Yeah, public safety
Oh, I
is
got it.
personnel, finance, welfare.
But is finance?
Yeah.
Is there a
Well,
finance?
they have their own finance committee. It's not the
Okay.
Board of Finance.
So should these be called subcommittees?
I would, thank you.
Yeah, since
are.
we do call the personnel subcommittee a subcommittee, maybe we should.
But see, when you get to finance, it's confusing.
It is.
So the Board of Selectmen has a subcommittee called Public Safety, one called Personnel, one called Finance, one called Welfare, currently?
Yes,
Should
yes.
it just say the following subcommittees?
Yeah, thank you.
And then not call personnel the subcommittee, and then put
Yes, dot, dot,
as
dot.
such other subcommittees as may be established by the Board of Selectmen. So they're considered subs and not appointed boards or commissions
These are just the subcommittees of the Board of
of the
Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen.
And other subcommittees as may be
Yeah.
established.
Yeah, I was a little confused with what these were.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that could be actually its own paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bullet point those out to make it,
Easy to-
you bullet point them out so it's
Yeah.
clear instead of.
So have it read, the first selectman or first selectwoman shall appoint members of the Board of Selectmen to the following subcommittees.
Yeah.
And then just list them out and remove subcommittee after personnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, do you want it bullet pointed?
No.
I think all of these will be.
And then at the end where it says and such other, it should be and other subcommittees as may be established.
Okay, gotcha, I got that.
Could we straighten this out a little bit and say, in the first paragraph, in 301, you call it the first selectman or first selectwoman. Once you get down below, can you just say with the first presiding, and just, the first, instead of saying both those words?
Yeah.
Because it's recognized that it's the first. Bob, is there any requirement that we do it that way, or could we just say the first?
We could even define the
It could be a defined term.
Yeah.
There we go, with the capitalization, see?
Up
Change
above. Also, AKA the first.
Yeah,
Well, we could say in parentheses,
You know how they always do that
We
word.
love
The
this
rest of this
word,
document is known
hereinafter.
as,
yes.
Document, right?
the first.
because we say it a lot.
Yeah. And again, it
First
gets
select
wordy
member.
and.
I'm on a roll and I haven't even had a cookie.
See how it looks? I've got my paragraphs all
Yep.
ready to.
I got my paragraphs all out here too. You want to see them?
We'll see if they match up. There is logic
Party
to
of the
it.
first part.
No, it's a nice paragraph, it's just.
Yeah, yeah.
But these subcommittees are
And
not
if you don't have
obsolete.
the
I wasn't sure
training,
if
you're not
welfare
gonna be able to read it.
exists, I
Plus,
guess.
you get lost. in-
Welfare exists.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the way it reads is these must be subcommittees and everything else they want to be subcommittees can be, but these are the minimum number.
Is that a statutory requirement?
No.
So here's another weird question, do we need to list them out?
Why don't we just leave it to the Board of Selectmen to determine what subcommittees they want to establish?
Or is that,
Yeah, and that gives them the opportunity to eliminate them if they-
Yeah.
without having
Such
to deal with this. So
subcommittees as
that's a
they
good.
may appoint from time to time.
just like
Yeah.
appointed commissions that may not be needed?
Right.
Like us
I like
after a
that.
while. Like us. I don't know,
Is
just,
there an opportunity for them to, as you say, mischief, to say, we don't want a personnel subcommittee, so we're going to get rid of it?
Sure.
That's up to them.
Because, but if it's in the charter, they have to have a personnel subcommittee.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And I think, at least personnel subcommittee, I think is referenced elsewhere.
Yeah, the only subcommittees that are mentioned is the personnel subcommittee. The only Board of Selectmen subcommittees from this is only mentioned in section 411. The first selectman or first selectwoman shall chair the Board of Selectmen's personnel subcommittee. That's the only other mention of a subcommittee in the charter.
It
So
doesn't
it's-
mention safety at all?
I don't believe so. I can check when we go.
yeah, see, that's where it's
I
defined
don't think
nowhere
it
else.
I think it's by tradition.
Yes, there's no other public sorry, excuse me.
You doing a word search?
Yep, and, there's only that's the only mention of public safety public safety actually in the charter. Yep.
Is right
It
here.
is in this section, yes, and the only other mention of the personnel subcommittee is in the section 411, when talking about the first, saying that they shall be the chair. So those are the only two mentions of
They've
subcommittee.
got an HR department now too, so I mean, that's kind of an interesting one for you to raise, like
Yeah.
that. I mean,
We have a personnel subcommittee, an HR director, and a
Department heads.
personnel, and there's another,
And the town managers are,
no, there's another person under the HR person.
Specialist.
The staff, it's the HR generalist, but that's not mentioned in anywhere.
I don't, I'm
No.
for giving them as much flexibility.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't,
that's why I don't want to limit.
if it's a real problem, we can add it back, but.
No, I'm in favor of that, because they should have the leeway to decide. And since there are eight, how many? 6 of them, right?
Mhm.
And so the potential for mischief is reduced when there are more.
You're only saving a couple of words.
Because this is the procedure paragraph, does it have to mention that they have to follow Robert's Rules of Order, or is that kind of,
No, there's no mention of Robert's Rules of Order in the charter. It's in the, I think it's in the rules, Board of Selectmen rules. The references shall follow it as a guide, which I highly recommend.
And it does
You
say,
probably gotta be,
Adopt
when you
Robert
talk about the
rules.
organizational meeting too, it's gotta be in there somewhere.
Then you get into this sometimes craziness of, the arcane rules that are more of a hindrance. Robert's Rules of Order is really better for large assemblies. In fact, the first paragraph says that, for large assemblies. But it is a nice guide, so you can,
so if they have a guide, and this paragraph talks about procedure, does this paragraph need to reference the guide that the Board of Selectmen have, like that they have to,
it can, but it doesn't.
it doesn't have to?
It says that they can determine their own rules and procedures.
Right,
They can
right.
determine their
Yeah,
own.
it's right there. The Board of Selectmen shall, by resolution, determine its own rules of procedure.
So just to finish where we were, are we saying that the sentence should be the first selectman or first selectwoman, or whatever we're saying, shall appoint members of the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board to such subcommittees as may be established by the board? We agree that that's what we
Yeah.
want?
I don't think you need the word such, it could just be, can establish.
To a
And
point.
so are we taking out public safety?
Shall appoint
Personnel
members.
So that's
Subcommittee
the question.
finance?
In other words, we're not going to, the question is, do we want the board to be required to establish certain subcommittees, or do we want to leave it entirely up to them?
Again, if we're just talking, let's just take a step back for a second, right? These issues don't go away whether there's a committee or not, right? So if there's a significant personnel issue, they're gonna create a committee. I just don't know if we need to hamstring them in this, or if there's a public safety issue.
Right.
They're gonna get together. It's not like they're not gonna talk about it. Do we need to really force them to
No.
get together on some of this stuff?
No, that's what I'm saying.
In
You
fact-
just need to take out the
That's what I'm
specific
saying.
items and just say that they have the ability to form subcommittees
Yeah.
as necessary.
What we could do is, earlier in the paragraph, when we talk about the organization meeting, we can say that one of the things they'll do with the organization meeting is establish subcommittees for the next 2 years.
Because a subcommittee that one board needs might not be the same subcommittees, and we can't foresee what the future subcommittees might look like. There could be, to Lolita's, there could be alien landings, and we need to have a subcommittee about the aliens, I don't know,
Well, okay, so again, thinking of some of these scenarios, and I don't want to play with this point, but what if at one point a town manager says, look, you guys really don't need a personnel subcommittee, let me handle that. And you got a first select woman or select man who's new at the job and says, oh, okay, and all of a sudden, it's gone. And we heard from the select people who were here earlier that they wanted things like a personnel subcommittee. I mean, that was one of the things we heard.
But why don't we give the board as a whole the authority for creating or abolishing committees so that this naive first select person can't just get talked into eliminating it by a sweet-talking town manager?
Well, what happened this time around, you got 4 brand-new people who you've heard, they didn't know what was even their roles.
Well, okay, so that was the question I posed a moment ago, is do you believe it's necessary to say there, you guys have no choice, we're building in the rule, you have to have a personnel subcommittee. Which of the committees that are so essential that we can't risk?
Public safety, personnel subcommittee, finance, welfare.
Okay,
That's my
But
opinion.
what I would say is, under this structure right now, with the committee structure, they still didn't know what was going on.
I know.
To use your example.
It would have been
still
nice
didn't.
if they had read the charter.
No, they still didn't. So I mean, it's not a hill I'm gonna die, but it's like, I just don't know if we need to be tying their hands on some of this stuff, but.
Well, but I think it came out in a lot of the conversations that they didn't realize the powers that they had
Right.
in this charter because they didn't either fully comprehend it, what they were, or read it and interpret it the way it should have been
And
interpreted,
they have those
right?
powers whether these committees exist or not.
that's right. Well,
I mean, this isn't saying that these committees are mandatory, it's a
I'm going
suggestion.
the other way, is it gives them a guide.
Fair enough.
That's true.
Well,
That's true.
I would yield to Paul on the question of, which committees are really important, and we should,
I don't know,
I'll take
what does
your-
welfare do?
Madam
Yeah,
Chair,
what
it
is
does make
welfare?
the committees mandatory, because it says the first selectman or woman shall appoint members, shall,
Shall.
to the following subcommittees, therefore making
Okay.
them a requirement.
Yeah,
What does welfare do?
They,
I don't think
welfare,
welfare's
a
that.
Board of Selectmen welfare subcommittee does not meet in the time that I've been with the
I
town.
don't think it's.
And the finance subcommittee, there was, I was involved in trying to organize for that committee to meet, and that never materialized either.
Does that mean it's right now it's like in the charter then, in theory,
So-
right? In theory.
No comment.
Were people were Board of Selectmen members appointed to those 2 committees? And they just never met?
I think they were.
And there was just no need for them to meet, probably.
I can't think of an issue that would come before the welfare subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen.
I don't even know what that would be.
Yeah, but what do they do?
Yeah. What does that do?
It depends on what they do, right?
That, and Commissioner Shivaswamy raises a good point. There's no other mention, there's no elaboration of those subcommittees. It
Except
just
for
says,
Except for the personnel subcommittee.
except, but that the first
Even
shall
that's-
chair it. There is actually no description of the duties and responsibilities of the subcommittees in the
So
charter.
maybe that's what
the
we
town
need.
manager
if
is
we-
the welfare officer, right? Is that another term that we use?
Yeah, it's somewhere around.
Yeah.
So should we find out what these committees are supposed to do first before we decide that it stays here? Because we don't know what welfare actually does.
Well, I don't know if they know what welfare does.
Right.
Well, Paul, you thought welfare was essential. What did you think it did?
No, I didn't
Yes,
say it
correct.
was
Town
second.
manager is the welfare officer. Thank you,
Yeah.
Commissioner Schofield.
Yeah.
You made your point on that one.
Have a cookie.
As soon as I could come up with a crushing reply.
He's thinking, he really was.
12 o'clock tonight.
I got it! Couldn't sleep.
So could we find out what these committees are supposed to do before we decide to eliminate them or keep them there?
I think, in my experience, the members of the personnel, the Public Safety Subcommittee, the chair of that subcommittee is the designated liaison with the Police Commission, like that.
Okay.
They report at meetings, right, Franklin?
Yeah, correct. It's currently Selectwoman Getz as the
Yeah,
chair
and she'll
of the Public
say,
Safety
I
Subcommittee.
attended the Police Commission meeting the other night, here's what was discussed.
So is the person who's on the finance subcommittee, are they the liaison to the Board of Finance?
I think so. Are they?
Do you have a liaison?
We don't always have a member of the Board of Selectmen present in our meetings. They're often there. But it's usually, the first select woman usually shows up. Maybe she's the chair of that subcommittee.
See, we need to know this, because if we're going to keep this here or take this out, we should at least know what they are.
I also think the Personnel Subcommittee
Yes.
is a different breed of cat entirely. I think there are references in the personnel rules to the Personnel Subcommittee in terms of the grievance procedures and
Right.
things like that. That's an actual role for the person.
Well, they're busy sometimes.
Yeah.
Regarding the Board of Selectmen Finance Subcommittee, the chair is First Selectwoman Wendy Maxtutis, and also Selectwoman Getz and Selectman Looney. Those are the three that comprise the Finance Subcommittee. And I know this from the organizational meeting for this current board from December 4th, 2023. I just pulled up the packet. And in it, there is an action item where they made all their liaison appointments and subcommittee appointments.
Right.
They did public safety, personnel, and finance. There's no mention of welfare.
So maybe the question is welfare necessary? Because we could take welfare out, because they could always add welfare later.
Right, as needed.
As needed, but we shouldn't force them to have welfare if they don't even use it.
And we should then have them,
Oh, wow, thank you. On the, received from public audience, the last, on our website, the last recorded minutes were 2009 of the Board of Selectmen Welfare
I
Subcommittee.
think we could strike that.
I think we can strike welfare and just leave that up to them.
What did they
They've had
do?
scheduling
Yeah,
problems.
what do they do?
Well, we can find out. I'll check
They did such a good job.
2009.
No more welfare issues.
That was the mic drop moment.
We're done.
we'll take it out.
So keep mention of the other subcommittees, just remove welfare?
Yeah.
Yeah. They haven't met since 2009.
And just out of curiosity, I just want to know what they do.
Well, it is
No one knows
public.
what they
I can check
do.
it.
They did.
they
Anybody
did,
can
yeah.
check it.
What did they do?
They terminated their committee.
15 years ago.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Okay.
They probably scheduled.
Is there anything else in 4.2?
Well, there are places that we could break it up just for easy
Yes.
reading.
Right.
Paragraphs,
But in terms of changes
right.
of content.
Content, that's
The rest refers to Freedom of Information Act. And then I guess it references other sections for.
Yeah, we have to make
Let's
sure
see
they do
statute.
match
You have to have
properly.
4 members.
I'm gonna make a draft with subheadings and
Yeah.
subject to your
Yeah.
review
And
changing.
403 as well needs to be
Yeah, 403, same thing.
same thing.
Can I
That
just,
one's even longer.
Yeah.
Since I don't know the
This whole
section
part four is
1-200
jumbled.
of the general statutes, does that require all town meetings to be open to the public? Or is that just for the legislative meetings?
No, all town boards, commissions, and agencies are subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and would be whether it's in this section or not.
Because this one says, according to that general statute, the meeting should be open to the public.
Yes.
That doesn't, and have the opportunity to address,
That means public audience.
right, that means public audience. Is
Yeah,
that,
Public audience is not an FOI requirement. That's purely in the charter.
right, but is this sentence basically saying in layman's terms, the Board of Selectmen has to have public audience?
Yes.
Yes.
But the way I'm reading it, it means every town meeting should be open to public. Is that not true?
Every town meeting is open to the public. They're all public.
But not
meetings,
public
they're
audience.
FOI, But no public audience.
Okay.
Nothing keeps any board or commission from establishing public audience, but it's not required in the charter, except for the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, thank you.
And the only time it's not open to the public is when they're in executive
Executive session,
session.
which it does say there.
Or collective bargaining.
Right.
Now, I'm going to admit that I have not cross-checked the sections referenced in the last sentence of section 4
And these may change.
to make sure they're okay. But I'm hoping maybe that our town staff will confirm that there.
We did find one so far
Yeah,
in all
I mean,
this.
not always right, so.
Right.
Generally, in this process, do a cross-check of every cross-reference. And sometimes we've missed a few over the years, but we will do a cross-check with all the cross-references.
Any other substantial changes in 402? Okay. 403, general powers and duties. It's a long paragraph.
Which we shall simplify as our gift to Simsbury.
Except for,
I don't know if we're that far down, but I know that there's the
yeah.
commissions, committees not to exceed 2 years. I'm not sure if that's the current practice. It seems that some of those extra commissions have existed
For a long time.
through organizational meetings and maybe not been reauthorized.
Can we go up a few,
Yeah.
several lines though? So I have a question regarding ordinances. So if they create an ordinance, okay? If an ordinance,
Create,
this is something that they should be reviewing during their, should this have an annual review, the ordinances that they have? Or, because there seems to be some things that we have in the code that have never been revisited. And that's not our charge to look at the code, but someone should be looking at the code on an annual or like every 2 years. I don't know how often, but it seems like there's things in there that could go away
and contradict.
or
each other.
contradict things. So is this the place to put that charge? They need to, I assume an ordinance is in the code, correct?
Yes, code of ordinances. The word
Right.
code refers to the code of ordinances.
Okay, so should there be a requirement in here for review?
You could certainly add that.
Because it seems like some of them, they're surprised by some of them.
Yeah, Marie Capriola actually did that at one point. I don't know if she did it just for gender issues but she did go, I don't know if she completed it, but I remember her going through. But you could add that to the charter that the Board of Selectmen shall periodically, from time to
Periodic
time,
reviews.
however you want to phrase it, review the code of ordinances for updates or consistency with the charter. It's not a bad idea, because we never did that. When we did this charter, we never went back to the code. When I say we, I mean collectively.
Right.
And amended the code of ordinances to match the new charter.
Yeah.
And, for instance, first selectman shall do this, first selectman shall do that. I think Maria did that, though. I think that's what she did, now that I remember it. She changed all the first selectman and town manager in the code of ordinances where it required the chief executive officer to do something. But having a requirement that the Board of Selectmen shall, from time to time, review the code of ordinances, or periodically, however you want to phrase it, would be a legitimate insertion if you decide that's what.
Well, I think it's legitimate for two reasons. It's legitimate because they need to be revisited from time to time because they might be outdated. And it also gives them the opportunity to know what ordinances we actually have
What-
on the books that they may be unaware of.
We are finding out.
I agree.
So it's part education and part cleaning house.
Yeah, because one of the things they told us was it took them a year to even figure out any of this, right? And so if we make them review it, they will learn it.
You would hope.
It just says.
You would hope.
Would be a quiz.
There's going to be a
From
quiz.
time to time, that's
There's
pretty
gonna be
nebulous, and they could say,
No, I would
well,
think at the
it's not our time,
organization-
it'll be
no.
the next election's
I
time.
think saying it at the organizational meeting is.
Well, but that's every year. That seems
No, that's every 2 years.
every 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe it's at the biannual organizational meeting that they review the code of ordinances.
Well, I
You can't
think,
do it
Quite a meeting.
in a single.
And not a single
yeah,
meeting.
and that's a ceremonial meeting with flowers and stuff, and
Oh,
what it could say is establish a plan for review for the ensuing 2 years. I don't think you'd want to direct them to, well,
every year's excessive.
It's too much.
Could
It's
create
too
a code
much.
review subcommittee.
Yeah.
Nice. I like how you tie that back.
Is
Say at a minimum,
Is that
every
essential or
ordinance
not?
has to be reviewed every 5
Becoming
or 10 years or whatever. Put them on a schedule for sunset.
It could time with the review of the charter too, just to make it more efficient. Say, here's your
It
new.
seems like a long time for some of
Right,
these
you can say,
ordinances.
here's your new charter, now take a look at your ordinances.
Are there too
I think we
many
just need to,
review
my
a
opinion
year?
is we need to put some language, a requirement
Too
in there
many
that they
to
review
review
them.
in 1 year, should they be broken up over?
The welfare committee can review them. They've been off since
Every
2009.
year?
Is this sentence, and I know I'm going back to semantics that we're talking
Yeah,
about,
no,
the
it's too
selectmen
much
shall
to
have
do
the power yet.
in one sitting.
All that
Maybe they should
legal
break it
terms, is that,
It's so we make it time to time.
you just read this and my
Give them a
brain just
sunset.
explodes.
which shall have the power to enact, amend.
Keep going, keep going. It goes on and on and on and on and on. It's all.
It doesn't say whereas anywhere, so I think we're good.
But in such an
added
event,
in there.
Whereas in our,
Yeah, I mean, this could be broken up
Yeah, it's just-
in shorter
No,
sentences.
see, I'm a huge advocate for the whereas, because it gives you a moment to pause and say, oh, this is a different topic now.
Right.
And Bob and I can always present to you all
Yeah.
a suggested
Yeah.
just doc.
draft.
Yes, please.
But here we are changing it now for the 2 years, right?
Yeah, we have that at the end, that we probably need to change the coterminus.
Yeah.
Could still be appointed every 2 years, but, and not to exceed 2 years, but.
Oh,
But it says coterminous with appointing the board of
Yeah,
selectmen. That's
you just
where,
say every 2 years, then they're
Yeah.
having to renew it, and they got half the board changed.
Well, they still can have the biennial organizational meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
And probably doing that.
I don't want to lose sight of Chris's question, though. Are we going to put in a sentence about requiring them to review the ordinances?
I mean, I think so.
I think it's
No,
important.
I do.
Yeah.
We didn't necessarily
Do
say
we all
it
think
yet.
it's
I just wanted to make
important?
sure.
Yes, but
Okay.
timing, I don't know.
Just didn't know if we got an answer
Yeah,
on that.
yeah, no.
No, I think that's,
I mean, I think they need to review them because they
Yeah, I
don't even
agree.
know what
No,
exists.
Totally agree.
is
Oh,
the
we-
periodically or from time to time language okay?
Well, there is a sentence later on in this long paragraph that the Board of Selectmen is authorized in adopting ordinances to
Yep.
incorporate any national recognized codes, rules, or regulations. That would be a good place to put in the code review requirement.
If they're going to provide 2 copies, they might as well have 2 up-to-date copies.
And, you know, it's a thick book, but there really aren't that many ordinances, not compared to some other.
No, but is there like something on there still from like the 1700s that they don't know about? I mean, every once in a while you hear of those crazy
had a witch
things.
trial on.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Can we talk about the witch coven that lived up on Felfishire and what happened with them? I mean,
There probably are some outdated ordinances that no one's looked at.
like you can't hitch your horse to.
on a Sunday.
Parking meter, yeah.
That's a good. That's just good practice.
But we do have a discussion on, halfway down, the Board of Selectmen right now says it's authorized to apply and accept on behalf of the town, state, and federal grants.
Yep.
And there was discussions about,
That's the obstacle where
Yes.
They see a grant available.
Not the word
town
apply
manager can't apply, you know.
versus accept. You know, that's maybe two little words, apply for, but
I mean, they're not really applying. They're not doing the application. The town manager is doing the application on behalf of.
But I thought his
the town.
argument was he can't apply
He can't
until
apply,
he gets their approval.
right, because-
And that messes
Because they
with
might
the-
not want to take on that debt or that,
Yeah,
that,
but sometimes they can't apply to certain
Right.
grants because there hasn't.
because of timing.
I can understand
We have the same-
I can understand the
same
accept
words, yeah.
But you
part.
maintain the same rules, right?
Same, yeah.
Striking the language to apply for.
Yeah.
So we run into the same obstacles.
Yes.
Yeah. 'Cause
Striking
otherwise you
the,
have to be ambiguous about it.
Franklin, I don't think we.
Yeah, I don't
It's a
think-
year,
decide to-
you know, it's-
We're striking that.
No,
Oh,
we
okay.
haven't decided, yeah.
Yeah.
that would just mean, they would still be authorized to accept it, so
Do we-
Well, they have to vote on accepting
To
it,
accepting,
right?
but do they have to be the ones who authorize the application of?
Well, they have to
Yes.
vote, yes, because they have to vote to allow the town manager to make the application.
Right.
So he can't apply unless they voted, but they're not physically applying. They're, should it say that they're giving the authority to the town manager to make the application on behalf of the town? I don't know.
think this language accomplishes what they want, which is that the staff can't apply for the grant without the approval of the
Right.
of the
I think
Board of
it's-
Selectmen, and I think that's a good,
Well, that's a good practice.
Right.
And they could do a special meeting.
yeah,
to
declare
clarify
that.
it's
That's-
significant.
And Bob, in many cases, do grant applications require that the town or city legislative body has approved the application?
A lot of them do, yeah. Not, I can't say every single one, but I know all the state grants always want an authorizing resolution even for the application. For the obvious reason that the state doesn't want to go through a whole administrative process reviewing a grant application, only have the legislative body say, oh, we don't want that. You know, so they want to know upfront, do you want this SCIF grant or not?
Well, because it usually comes with a lot of,
It's a lot of work.
well,
A lot of work.
well, and the gift or
So
grant
that's-
comes with a lot of strings,
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
most of the time.
right.
Well, the way I read it, it's the Board of Selectmen that's doing the application. That's the way I read this right now.
Well, it says they're authorized to apply instead of they're authorizing the application to be made, is, I think, the difference. I don't know if that's important.
I don't know if it is either, but
You could say authorization of the submission of or something.
But the way it reads right now, people seem to understand what that means.
Everybody understands what it means.
Yeah, so
Right.
we just.
So why change it?
okay, I just,
I just, and at the risk of not, as your liaison, as being impartial and neutral, I just wanted to just, I just want to express from the administration standpoint how the Board of Selectmen still has ultimate approval of the grant, requiring the Board of Selectmen to authorize the town manager to apply for every single possible grant is an inefficient current system. And one of the strengths of the town manager form of government, having the executive branch being able to apply whenever they come up immediately, as fast as possible, and then with ultimate acceptance of the grants still being that responsibility for the Board of Selectmen, that accomplishes both roles. And in my experience, every single, pretty much virtually all grants that have ever been brought forth for the town manager to apply for, the Board of Selectmen approve anyway. And I just wanted to make that point known to the commission.
Let me ask you a question. For the microburst that happened, did the town apply for a grant, for an emergency grant to help with the cleanup?
Yeah.
And was that done in a timely fashion, or was there a hiccup
was done
because
after.
the Board of Selectmen didn't have time to authorize the town manager to apply?
There was, my recollection is, there was an emergency meeting of the Board of Selectmen, which, under FOI, you don't need to notice in 24 hours for the purposes of applying for those FEMA funds. It had to be in like 4 o'clock the next day or some craziness. So my recollection is there was like, we're having an emergency meeting, authorize the application, send it in the next day at 4 o'clock. And then afterwards, per FOI, there was a posting of the minutes. And so that was a true emergency. I think what Franklin's talking about is sometimes there's recurring grants where you're eligible, like the Dial-A-Ride grant, it's a good example.
Correct, and the
Like the
Homeland
what grant,
Security
Bob?
Homeland
grant,
Security grant.
Dial-A-Ride.
an emergency performance management grant.
Routine grants, not big dollars. The Dial-A-Ride, I think, is $14,000 a year or something like that. And what happens is, we just take the letter from last year, change the dates, and it gets resubmitted to the Board of Selectmen. They authorize the application and the acceptance. It's fairly routine, but we do take the step of having the Board of Selectmen authorize the application.
So how do we deal with the two issues?
A couple of things could be done. You could specifically authorize the Board of Selectmen to delegate this function to the town manager for grants under X dollars for a duration of less than X years. So they could pass a resolution saying, you're hereby authorized to apply for the following grants. We all know what they are. They come up every year. Sometimes they come out of nowhere. But if you could set thresholds for dollars and duration, with an opportunity, I think, and a notification saying, communication back to the board saying, hey, board, just so you know, we apply for the following grants in between meetings or something. And that would lessen the burden, I think.
Or could you do recurring grants and emergency grants? Instead of putting a dollar amount on something?
You could, yeah.
But
I've been asked
Allowing
many,
the board to set a threshold.
no, does that go in the charter though? Because if the Board of Selectmen has the power, it can delegate the power.
well, I don't know about that. I've been asked many times, hey, can the Board of Selectmen delegate this power?
Yeah, I think it can.
I've been asked that. And I've said, no, because it says the Board of Selectmen is authorized to apply for.
Yeah.
Can you delegate? And I've taken a very conservative view, I'll admit that. And I've said, it's not so hard to do. First of all, they have to knowingly delegate it.
That's right.
Yeah, they'd have to say, we hereby delegate the following to you, and then the delegation, they couldn't, first, town manager couldn't exceed the scope of the delegation. For purposes of clarity, I would like to see the charter actually say that. Because some powers can be delegated and other powers can't be delegated. And I'm not gonna say that a $14,000 grant application is gonna end us up in court or anything, but strictly reading, I think it's a power that's reserved to the Board of Selectmen specifically. So it can be fixed by saying that the Board of Selectmen can delegate the power if it chooses to.
So then they could say, well, this year, any recurring grants not to exceed $25,000, whatever dollar amount they want. We're gonna delegate that responsibility to the town manager.
Yeah, I mean, we know what the list is, right? We could put together a list of the dozen.
But instead of us putting a dollar amount in here,
Yeah, you
We can
say
just
recurring.
state
we
that
can
they
give them
can
the
delegate.
ability
That's right. That's
Give
how
them
you
to
would do it.
delegate and set the limit
As appropriate.
as appropriate, because what cost $10,000 this year might be $20,000 in 5 years.
Right.
We don't know that, right?
And that's just simple administrative law. We could just give that, to the, we can just say that power is capable of being delegated.
Absolutely.
And we're still just talking about applying, not accepting. And that's where I think.
They still have to accept it once
Yes.
if they're granted the
Because there
award.
might be strings attached that.
There's
will
always
cost the
strings
town.
attached.
Well,
Correct, there's some grants that require a town match.
Right,
Right.
or.
Right.
After
So
5
we're
Or
years.
talking
other,
about
or
the
other reporting
application
requirements.
Yeah, we're only talking.
Just the
about-
application
Exactly.
process.
I believe that just removing the words "to apply for" just means that that step does not have to be formally motioned and approved by the Board of Selectmen. The town
So you
manager is
can fill
able
out
to
the
apply for
paperwork.
everything, but at the end of the day, if the town manager applies for a grant, we get it, we won't do anything until we bring it up to the Board of Selectmen.
Well-
Let them know.
But see, I think that's dangerous though, to give the town manager the ability to apply for anything and everything, because if
Grants.
it's not for grants, because if it's not in the line with the goals and objectives of the Board of Selectmen, okay, let's just say he finds a grant out there and it's to paint all of our roads purple, okay? And he wants to apply for it. That's not And that's not in line with what the Board of Selectmen, what their goals are. He shouldn't be wasting man-hours.
That's right.
Doing that,
That's
right?
It's a,
I think adding the term, I think, Bob, you had a phrase, basically, they have the option to delegate based off Board of Selectmen set criteria.
yes.
What that set criteria is, again, I think that's based off year to year. This year it could be 5,000, next year it could be 20,000. I
Different
mean,
boards might have different ideas about what that ought to be.
you're right. It's all based off the whole financial situation of the town, really.
What do you want to say, Bert?
Yeah, well, further to your example, there are grants that entail operational costs in the future. And, if the town manager feels strongly about it and the board feels a different way, that it would be dangerous to allow the town manager
Yes.
to apply for it and exert that extra pressure and say, here's the money, how can you turn it down? So, yeah, I am not comfortable with eliminating the requirement entirely, but I have no problem with allowing the Board of Selectmen leeway to delegate.
I asked Mark that question, and he said, yeah, I shouldn't have that authority, because what if there's a grant for charging stations in Main Street, and I can get 100 of them, and I get approved, and now, like you said, there's some cost involved with it, or maybe you don't want 100 charging stations,
Right.
80 charging stations on Main Street, so we should go to the board,
Yeah.
tell them what we want to get.
And Mark did tell us that he thought that the Board of Selectmen did not have enough authority. He wanted to give them more authority.
So giving them the authority to delegate that responsibility selectively,
Yes. With parameters.
with the nice words that you're going to put around that.
Yeah.
To give them some latitude.
Thank you.
Use whereas once, no, I'm kidding. Therefore,
We should start using where
Way
it's
too-
awfully hard to stop.
please don't start.
Okay, I think we've got the point.
I get text messages that say whereas now because I have an attorney for a son.
But you're going to be an attorney too.
Not until I turn 62 and go to
Right.
school.
And then you're going to be in my class.
So we talked about federal grants.
Is the rest of this just kind of covering our butts verbally? Is that the rest of these few sentences, basically what they mean? Anything else
so
comes
we-
up in the world of public service?
I know we had a discussion previously about why the contracting language is limited to contracts with government entities, but I've forgotten what we discussed.
What we talked about before was that any other contract, if it's approved in the budget, expenditures
Like to buy copy paper.
appropriated in the budget, 5 copy machines,
It's
whatever.
coming back to me now.
It would diminish the power of the chief executive to carry out the budget if he had to go back every time and ask for contract review for budgeted items.
That makes sense.
So do proclamations ever have to be mentioned in the charter? I know we mentioned ordinances, but proclamations are different because they're not laws, they're just a statement.
Just statements of,
So we never have to address proclamations in the charter? Okay. Only because we had a proclamation read today, I'm just asking that question.
they have no force of law, they're just
Okay. It's just a nice,
nice to have. They
Right.
express the feelings of the.
right, but there's no law standing behind it. Okay. So are we good with that section? Because we're going to go to 411.
411.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Let's just see here whether there's any.
Oh, we're coming back to the other sections later.
Yes, we just
Thank
want,
you.
those are the only sections we wanted to talk about
Sorry,
tonight.
sorry, I didn't read the agenda.
You didn't?
Yeah, only where we're meeting, that's why.
This is the only time I've seen that happen.
I've been reading this chapter for too many years.
So we've decided we want the first select person, we should wait until Paul gets back before we have this conversation again.
Yeah.
But we've already decided
Yeah.
that we want him to be elected.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
not appointed.
And we're gonna keep him as a chief elected officer, because the chief administrative officer is the town manager.
And we did
Or
have
the
this.
chief, what do they refer to as?
TBD on chief executive officer.
Yeah,
TBD on that.
Not really.
because we found out the last meeting, there was different definitions depending on what's a chief executive officer.
That's right.
We had a
So unless we know what that is.
Can we, actually, do
just
we
talked
have
about
to use
keep-
those?
Right, that's my question.
Do we
Why
have
not
to use chief elected, chief executive,
just
chief
for-
operating?
One
Is
person has
that-
to be named that by state statute, correct?
Right? Is that a statute?
Named what, though?
No.
Chief?
Designated, chief executive officer.
Chief executive officer by state statute, we talked about that last time, didn't we? Has to be named, as one person has to be designated as that.
Yeah, I think that's in,
Can be.
I don't remember that in the statutes. What I remember is that we're authorized, the town is authorized to appoint a chief executive officer who may be a town manager who is the
Right.
chief administrative officer.
Right.
Are
It also
those
said something
defined?
about a warden, too, which.
That's for the welfare
I think I have it here
department.
somewhere if you want to see it, but.
No, are we using these terms because they tie in with some sort of state statute? Is that the reason why we use these terms?
Well, I think we got a lot of feedback that seemed to imply there's meaning behind chief executive officer.
So there clearly
I
is
don't know.
meaning behind chief executive
yeah,
officer.
but there's not a clear definition.
Right, so what is it supposed to
Can
be?
someone be the chief, what'd you say again? Because I'm,
There's
Chief-
chief elected officer and chief executive officer.
so can you be a chief executive officer and administrator?
Typically,
Yeah.
the chief executive officer, one of the functions is a chief.
Is to be the
The
administrator.
administrator.
So they don't have to have it in the title.
I mean,
Well-
it seems like we, sorry. go.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, but I think this is the moment where we should step back and rather than focus on which terms we're gonna use, talk about
Read my mind.
what the roles of the
That's right.
the
Read my mind.
positions are and what, you know.
Yeah, no, we were just gonna say that.
The key functions of the chief executive officer are appointed, typically, appointing the directors, supervising the staff.
I mean, we don't have to call the first selectman anything. The first selectman can be the first
I
selectman.
mean, the town
right?
manager can be the town manager.
First,
and-
I'm with Burr here. I don't understand why we keep getting caught up in these titles about what we should be
Because
calling
everybody's
who.
caught up in the titles when they
Right.
talk to us.
Right, but we don't have to follow, right? We
Right,
can keep them
right.
as is. We seem to have decided to keep the board of select, so I don't know why we keep coming back to this, and I fundamentally don't understand
Well, are there any
why and what is it gonna
inconsistencies in how they're
achieve?
being used? I
Yeah.
guess that would be the only thing.
Yeah, it's the
But again,
inconsistency.
Bert's point is the right one, though. I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. Let's figure out what they are first, as opposed to what
Well,
we.
you said
Go
it
to the second
earlier.
If you go to the second paragraph, it says, "The first selectman or first select woman shall be a voting and participating member of the Board of Selectmen and shall preside when present at meetings of the board." It also says in the next paragraph, shall be the chair of the Board of Selectmen's Personnel Subcommittee. All right, so you have that. And then there are the ex officio, a member of all other town boards, commissions, and agencies, but without voting power. It also says, the next paragraph, they shall have the powers, duties, and responsibilities conferred, imposed on that office by the Connecticut General Statute or Special Act, except insofar as inconsistent with this charter. So,
But it doesn't say that their role is to be, they're really, I mean, at the end of the day, the first select person's role is to be the liaison between the Board of Selectmen and the town manager, to set the agenda for the meetings, right?
Well, yeah, they have to set, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't.
No, go ahead.
Cut you off.
No,
But from the first meeting we've had, which was what, 4 years ago?
Yep.
We have been asked, or we've been planning to discuss the respective roles of the town manager, the Board of Selectmen, the first selectman. This is where we make those decisions.
Yes, yep.
In deciding the statute. So again, yes, it's clear that the first selectman currently has certain roles in the organization of the board, like setting the agenda for board meetings, presiding over those meetings. We've heard at least one member of the Board of Selectmen think that those should be the only things that distinguish the first selectman. I disagree with that. Now, I think the town manager has to have principal day-to-day responsibility for the work of the town staff,
Right.
the operation of the town's executive functions. I think the town manager has to be supervised by the Board of Selectmen, and the best way to do that is to specify that the first selectman has a special function, a special role in administering that relationship. I haven't got language to do that yet, and I'm throwing this out here, but you've heard the ideas before. I think, what we want to avoid is a situation where the town manager can divide members of the Board of Selectmen, can report things to one member and not to the board as a whole, and that means that whenever the town manager is discharging his or her obligation to provide information to the Board of Selectmen, the first selectman has to be included. And to the extent that the Board of Selectmen wants to communicate with the town manager outside of a meeting of the Board of Selectmen, that should be the job of the first select person. So that's pretty much the extent of any light I can shed about how I think the relationship should work and what we should build into this section.
So they should be also providing context around the goals of the Board of Selectmen, goals for collective bargaining, goals, their board's goals, to make sure that
Their
the town.
strategy.
Their strategy.
The goals and objectives.
No, thank you, I'm good.
I mean, we don't want to limit the ability of other board members
Right, to
to
participate.
provide information,
Right.
participate, and all of that.
But it should be the responsibility of the first selectman to convey the collective agreement of the Board of Selectmen, not just his or her personal agenda to the town manager.
And because if outside of a board meeting, if one select person should meet with the town manager, either give the town manager instructions or
Which they can't
convey
do.
something about policy, the first selectman should know about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I do like the way that we do in the town manager, the duties of the town manager, boom, boom, boom. Duties of the first selectman, boom, boom. I mean, it should be really clear, which right now I don't think it is. It's a little,
It's clear, but it's not written clearly.
yes.
I think one of the things I had suggested for the May 6th meeting was the town manager shall, this is under 501, the town manager shall be directly responsible to the first selectman or first select woman for carrying out all acts and policies of the Board of Selectmen and all resolutions and ordinances adopted by the town. Okay, so that says they have to report directly responsible to the first selectman, but it's also for the acts and policies of the Board of Selectmen.
Should we,
So it's communicated through the first selectman, I think is what you're trying to do.
should we
I'm
take
not
a
100% sure, but that's one way of doing it.
Wonder if you put a
Also,
corresponding to it. in the
Well,
first
also, in
Yeah.
another charter, it says that the first selectman shall oversee the affairs of the town.
Yeah.
So in a way, it strengthens what they're doing without changing that person to the chief executive officer.
what we could do is we could create mirror language from 501, town manager section.
I don't think that language is currently in.
No, I'm not talking about overseeing the affairs, but
No, also the first part you read is also not in 501 yet, right?
No, it's not. That's what I had suggested a change.
Right.
but we could put
I put it both, yeah.
it in
Right.
both places.
Yeah.
You know, I think, if you want to eliminate the chief elected officer, you can. It's there. It does say, it gets back to they're the chief elected officer. They oversee the affairs of the town. but they work with the town manager.
The chief elected officer is okay, because that's pretty clear. At the
Yeah.
moment we start getting into executive, administrative, and so forth, it has to be because there's a requirement to have somebody designated.
There is. He just sent it around, but there
Right.
is.
So, but does, unless there's some sort of a larger requirement coming from a state statute that says that needs to be in the charter, it doesn't need to be in the charter.
Yeah,
Because none of us seem to know what it is.
we all have our own definition.
We all have, we don't have a defined term around it.
Well, let's take a look.
And the other thing is, if it does have to be aligned somehow with the state statute, does that need to be in a charter? Or is that something that can be designated saying it's
Just reference
automatically,
it.
Sure.
it's automatically assumed?
Well, because the state statute can
Right.
change.
The state statute can change. So it could be that, our charter says X, and then the state statute says, well, send somebody, who is your Y? And we'll say, well, the Y is X because that's our chief elected officer.
Yeah.
That's the face of our organization.
The statute 7-193, Franklin just sent it around, says required provisions.
I'm sorry, Bob, I couldn't hear you.
7-193 says required provisions.
It's in your email.
Subsection 1, municipality shall have a legislative body, then it talks about what it shall be. Subsection 2, the municipality shall have a chief executive officer who may be one of the following. And it
Okay.
says,
And is one of the following a select person?
First selectman, chief administrative officer appointed by the board.
That takes care of that.
Town
There's a
manager.
town manager.
Town
is one
manager.
of those.
A town,
Gee.
city, or.
Yeah, we did skip that, one of these
Yeah, it does.
multiple.
So in
So-
effect, we've chosen, the last charter commission chose to make the town manager the chief executive officer within the meaning of this statute. We have no idea what that meaning is.
That's possibly the meaning, is the chief executive officer is as defined in that other
Right,
statute.
I mean, so.
It's a designated
But we
role.
don't think that the statute prohibits us from elaborating about the roles.
And then we have another statute which we've seen that talks about what a town manager is. It doesn't apply here because we're a charter town.
That's
It applies to non-charter town, but it does give us some guidance as to what exactly a town manager is intended to do. The duties are, shall exercise the powers and perform the duties. Such manner shall be limited to expenditures, and it goes on to talk about some minimal duties. So there is a definition of what a town manager is.
It also has some oversight responsibility for the Board of Finance in that
It
statute.
does, yes. But that's a statutory board of
Exactly.
finance.
Not a charter.
It doesn't apply here because we're a charter town,
But it could be
it
guidance.
does give us some guidance. And I think the charter says town manager shall have all the powers except as provided in its charter, or could say that if it doesn't say it. So there is some guidance as to what a town manager is.
So are we saying we want this section to be more specific like we have in the town manager section with bullet points?
I think it
There's
should
no,
be.
there's no real mention of the town manager. I think-
Well, no,
like you're
there's no
right,
mention
like,
to
yeah.
connect the two.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I think,
Yeah,
you
I mean, I think
should.
we want additional provisions
Yeah.
to
I think
what
it-
we have here.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it should be
Modify those roles.
Yeah.
But
A,
it should-
B, C, D,
Yeah.
1, 2,
yeah.
3, 4, whatever.
We just, again, I've been going back and forth on this, but we don't want to end up going back where we have a strong first select woman or selectman and a town manager who doesn't have the authority to carry out the professional duties that we originally wanted a town manager to do.
Right.
So we got to be a little careful,
Yeah.
careful of that.
Agreed.
We also want to be careful to make sure that the town manager doesn't take too much authority over because it's not clearly what the board and the first select person, their very clear-cut responsibilities are. I think there's a balance that we need to.
Well, that's the question. So in my mind, what's here is clear. The question is, do we add?
411 is clear?
Well, to me, but well, what is here is clear. The question is, do we add more to this to make it more clear, and define it vis-a-vis the town manager?
That is what I am advocating.
And
talking
that's what
about-
we need to do.
I'm sorry, I meant to, are you suggesting to make it clearer but not add additional authority?
No, that's not what. That's for us to discuss. Do we want to add additional authority, and
But
make
we want to make it
very-
clear what they're doing
So make it
now.
clear, yeah,
Right.
I wouldn't want
And
to
we
add
need to-
authority.
No.
I don't want to add.
No, I don't either. I think it just
additional
needs to clear cut, is, so they don't, like you said, if there's a
So they
strong
don't
one and
have-
not a strong another, no matter which side it is.
Because we spent a lot of time making it very clear for the town manager. We haven't made it clear what the role of the first selectman
Yeah.
Right.
or woman is.
Shall we do that? Look through this and see what we want.
So, in interest of time, why don't we each come with a list of things that we want to add to this section before they work on a draft, because I don't want them to work on a draft and then waste their time, and come with, your top 5 things, or, whatever that you want outlined in here for the next meeting.
Okay.
Because that will take care of we're planning our next meeting. And then, I think we all need to think about that a little bit more, about exactly how to communicate that.
Yeah.
And then, are you all good with that?
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good idea.
And then, all right, so since we finished this, I'm just gonna go in order of the agenda, because then we'll talk about planning the next meeting in a minute.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say, just for making the document clearer, this section is Chapter 4, Board of Selectmen and First Selectmen, but the mention of First Selectmen is all the way at the bottom. I just wanted to ask for clarification, just to make the document read better, since it starts with Section 401 General, then it goes into Section 402 Presiding Officer, and it talks about the First Selectman. Would it be in order to actually move that section up
Yeah,
and put it near the top, and Bob and I can obviously give you a draft on how that would look?
order of operation.
You're checking those cross sections.
Yeah, right.
Then it changes all the crap,
Because
You're screwing
it's odd to put the biggest
Yeah.
role at the bottom of the
Yeah.
chart.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
You want to bill to a client.
Okay, so, next thing is to approve the May 2025 minutes. Does anybody have any changes?
I'll make a
Discussion? May 2nd, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, planning the next meeting. So we're gonna, come with ideas for 411, we'll finish, and then finish section 400 or chapter 4, so we're done with that.
You want us to take a crack at rewriting section 412 for your review?
Sure.
Direction to employees?
And then we also need to revisit, what was it,
501, 502?
50 something.
Yeah, I don't know if there's.
Where's my notes from last time?
It's 503.
503.
502,
502B.
yeah, 502C, 503A, or to move those all around. So it's 502 and 503, right?
Yeah. So we need to revisit those. And then, I want to thank you all for doing the doodle poll. We can discuss meeting dates set the meeting dates at the next one after I go through the doodle poll.
I'm right to say that our next meeting is Monday night, right?
What?
Is it Monday, the
That's right.
16th? I just want to make sure that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I know that's also a Board of Selectmen meeting night, too, I believe.
I don't have my phone, so I can't tell you. My
Correct.
phone is somewhere.
Okay.
It's also a Board of
Because I
Selectmen.
also know it's hometown hero and it's all kinds of things going. Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same plate.
And the dates that I threw out there were based on when Board of Ed, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen already had scheduled meetings for the rest of the year. So I eliminated all those dates, so we can discuss the rest of the year's calendar dates with the assumption that we're taking August off, since we're not meeting the August 1st requested deadline anyway.
Thank
Okay.
you for putting that together.
Yeah.
Those dates must have been a labor of love.
Well, yeah, well, just trying to figure out when everybody else was meeting was a challenge.
Do you want my phone?
No, thank you. I mean, there's not there's only 2 times where we're all available, so it's gonna have to be the majority rules on these meeting dates, because now it's just, literally, there's 2 dates. The rest of the year, we're all available at the same time.
For the rest of the year?
Uh-huh. Wow. Yeah. But,
Really?
yeah, so
We're
I'll,
busy people.
yeah, it's vacation season. So, I'll present those at the next meeting. Do I have,
Next meeting, I have 411, section 411, revisit 502 and 503. Was there anything I missed?
and we're gonna finish chapter 4.
Or try, attempt to.
And
Yeah.
412.
We can and we shall.
But you're not coming up with a draft on 411, are you? Aren't we
No,
giving you feedback?
we're giving you feedback before you do a draft, because we don't want you to waste your time.
It's 412, that one paragraph on 412.
Directions to boys. Move it up in the section.
But not rewrite it.
Right.
Okay, good.
Right. Do I
Okay.
have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second? Any opposed?
Jumped up on that.
Thank you again for all your time and
Thank you.
hard work.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
bringing us together through local programming,
Education and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community.
Ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings.
And celebrating milestones.
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions. And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue.
Even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open.
Continues to educate our youth and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SEM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
For generations to come.
Visit our website
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media.
where your town
Your schools
And your government come together.